Today is July 31st, 2019. I am Cameron Wood here at the Ohio History Connection in Columbus, Ohio, speaking with Paula Haines. Paula, can you please say and spell your name for us?
Sure. Paula Haines, Paula, and Haines is Haines.
Thank you. So where did you grow up?
So I was raised in a small town called Kenton, Ohio, a farm community in northwest Ohio of about 8,000. So we grew up just a upper middle class family there, and I feel like I had a very privileged background.
How did you end up in Columbus, Ohio?
So I went to college at the University of Kentucky, and then moved back to Columbus for my first job, which is in retail site location analysis. My degree was actually in advertising. And then I had various jobs, various businesses with my husband after we got married, and stayed home and raised the kids, and then helped my husband. We started a marketing business. So I had my own marketing agency for about 10 years. And that led to getting involved with Freedom a la carte.
Can you give us a quick history of Freedom a la carte?
Sure. So Freedom a la carte is a nonprofit, and it started in 2009 as a supportive arm, basically, for a specialty docket in Franklin County called Catch Court. Catch Court was started by Judge Paul Herbert, and it was he literally just realized that these women coming in with prostitution, solicitation charges were actually victims of sex trafficking. And so in order to help them and restore them, he started this specialty docket where the women are on probation for 2 years, and during that 2 years they have residential treatment for their addiction. They receive trauma counseling and just all the supportive programs they need to start to rebuild their life. And then they're in court as a group once a week for support and programming, and just part of that CATCH program. And CATCH stands for Changing Actions to Change Habits. So that's what that is, how that was established. And then Freedom started just going to court, seeing what was happening, and how can we help these women succeed? This is a great program. What can we do to help? And the organization over the years has really grown organically by just looking at this group of women that we really want to embrace and help them, kind of reintegrate back into the community. And how can we do that? How can we help fill the needs that are there? So the first was just started with bringing meals to them while they were in court once a week. And then that led to a mentorship program where we established a mentor for each of the women in the process. A lot of the women came from very unhealthy upbringings or backgrounds, and they didn't have an example of what a healthy relationship looked like. So the mentorship program has really been a bedrock of what we do. And then, that's led to outings and different other social life skills type things that we can do to help socially integrate them back into society. And then we realized after a few years of these women building their confidence and being successful in their recovery that they couldn't get a job. And they couldn't really be successful on their own if you can't support yourself financially. So we thought, what can we do to help these women get a job? And we started looking around at other models and kind of took those as a guide and ended up buying a food cart on eBay for $1,200 and launching Freedom a la carte as a food service business, a social enterprise. We pushed that cart around the streets of Columbus, parked it in front of the courthouse. We took it to festivals. We pulled it behind various vehicles, and as it was bouncing around the roads, that's how we started. Always knowing that we needed to serve really delicious, high quality food, because people might stop by and purchase your product because of your cause and they like what you're doing. But to build a business, they need to come back again and again. And you do that by really delivering a great product. So we've always kept that at the forefront. So that business has since grown. We realized that there were some obstacles with the food cart, right? The weather-related, as well as a lot of waste, food waste, not really knowing what. And so the transition to catering was just addressing that obstacle, where orders are placed ahead of time and everything's made to order, and we can staff accordingly. And so with that move, we've been able to really build a business that's successful, that makes a profit every year, and that extra money can help support the programs that we're doing. So I think that that's such a great model for a nonprofit to be able to be sustainable in the community, but then also to really be able to offer real workforce development for these survivors of human trafficking.
So it's a combination of both social education and kind of career education.
Absolutely, hard skills and soft skills. We really, in the workforce development program, we're really this is a first job for a lot of the women. So food service is a great place to do that. A lot of us had first jobs in the food service industry, right? And so you're just really learning basic work skills, work ethic, how to show up to work on time, how to navigate the bus system, what to do if one of your children are sick, and just navigating those processes and doing some conflict resolution on the job and plowing through when things get tough. And, in a kitchen, we really aim to keep the environment safe. We're very trauma informed and we don't want to do triggers. So it's kind of unique for a kitchen that it is a calm, organized atmosphere, but it's busy. And so there's stress there as far as being active and having things continually that need to get done. And all of those skills are part of what's learned. And so I really believe that women coming through our program, whether they're there for just 90 days or the full 24 months, they're building these skills that are transferable, and we can help them get a job anywhere. Rather, they want to stay in the food industry. Some of them do. Some of them don't, and they are transitioning into other jobs in the community with employment partners and having great success.
So how do you feel the impact has been so far from?
So the impact is amazing. Everybody wants to know numbers, so I'll share a few numbers with you. We provide services to over 200 survivors every year. Last year, in 2018, it was 234 survivors that we served. We've provided jobs to about 97 survivors at this point. In the last 3 years, 59 have received workforce development training, and of those, about half, 24, have transitioned into jobs in the community. So that's the statistics, right? Those are the numbers. What's really happening is that women are becoming self-sufficient, right? They are reintegrating back into society. They're getting their first paychecks. They're opening checking and savings accounts. They're getting their driver's license and purchasing a car. They're moving into their own independent housing that we help furnish for them. They're going to school, graduating from college, buying their own houses, regaining custody of their children, and they're, getting off government assistance. That's the success stories that we have.
Well, it sounds like you're doing good work, but that's not what you started out doing. How did you end up becoming involved with Freedom a la carte?
So personally, I started as a volunteer. So in 2013, the organization was introduced to me. Some friends of mine had been talking about Catch Court, and there was this program called Abolition University, to learn about human trafficking. And one of my friends had a daughter who was interning at Freedom and was helping with this, and I said, yeah, I would love to go and learn more. And education is powerful, and just knowing what's happening, and I was blown away by my lack of awareness of this issue right here in Central Ohio, that women are selling themselves on the streets of Columbus for sex at the expense for someone else's gain. And it broke my heart. I wanted to do something to help these women, and I loved the model that Freedom had developed, that it was workforce development, that we're really helping these women get on their feet so they can do it themselves. I just think that's empowering, and loved that. And I love the sustainability model of having a social enterprise to help keep the organization strong financially. So I also love to cook as a hobby. And so I thought, this is something I can really get into. So I jumped into the kitchen and started helping. At the time, we were doing weddings throughout the summer. So every time there was a wedding, I would go in the day before and help prep the food. And then I would spend that Saturday, with the women lugging trays of food up and down steps. And we did all kinds of crazy things. But helping pull those events off. And I realized shortly after that, the season had kind of ended, and I thought the staff was so strong, but I started to see people leaving the management staff because they weren't making enough money, they didn't have benefits, they were in a situation where they couldn't as a staff member, sustain themselves. I said, I need to help them get some money. What can I do? And so I had this idea of, I was in Dublin at the time. That's where we raised our kids. And I thought we could do this fundraiser to raise some money. And that I was challenged by the staff to make that into something a little bit larger. And it ended up turning into what's now Eat Up Columbus, which is an annual event that is a collaboration with chefs in the community where they get together and each chef prepares or collaborates on a course. And it's usually a 5 to 7 course dinner. And the community all comes together and sits at long harvest tables, just meeting new people or gathering with friends. And we've raised $100,000 that first year. And over the 5 years, we've raised over $600,000. So that was kind of my step in, let's get more involved. And then from that, I went on the board. And then from the board, I stepped down. We had hired 2 executive directors in the period of a year. And neither was a great fit. And so I stepped down and said, you know what, I will be the interim director until we find somebody that we want to move ahead. And as that interim director in that first month, I brought some people onto the team. I brought a new chef on and somebody to handle the volunteers and the coordination with Catch Court. And I also had been talking that I thought we needed a case manager because the women were coming into Freedom into their job, and they might have, they have personal issues that they're trying to deal with. One might be a job eviction notice, right? So an employee comes in and they've just received a eviction notice. And what was happening was the chef and the catering salesperson are trying to help them figure this out, right? In the meantime, there's orders that need to get out. There's all kinds of things in the kitchen that need to happen, and it just creates this chaos and stress for everybody. And so I thought bringing in a case manager can help the women deal with all these life issues, so when they get to work, they can just concentrate on that. And one of the survivors in our program that had been our kitchen supervisor at the time heard me talking with someone and said, I'm certified to do case management. She was a student at Columbus State. Would you consider hiring me? So we sat down and talked, and at that state, she needed to have a certified counselor, a licensed social worker, supervise her. So we hired someone to come in and supervise her and brought her in as our case manager. And it reshaped our program, like really gave us that inside knowledge of really what it means to empower survivors instead of enabling them. And so with that new staff, I thought, we've got something here. I really want to see it through. And so I asked the board if I could stay on and see it through. And here I am 3 years later.
Do you feel like you've fit in better than you thought you would, or?
Absolutely. And I think that I'm capable of a lot more than I thought I was. I didn't have all the experience in all the different areas, but I think that was a skill that I developed over the years. I really learned if you don't know how to do something, you just figure it out. You can learn lots of things with the help of, tutorials and YouTube, and thank goodness for Google. And so just being able to take that approach of knowing that, just being that open book to learning and admitting when we don't know something, and reaching out to board members and community people that want to help, that can advise you and guide you along the way. That's been a big part of what we do.
It sounds like a lot of your growth has been kind of organic. You've been trailblazing, so you're kind of setting new paths. Where do you think you're going in the future?
Sure. So several things. Another thing that we've kind of trailblazed is we recognized a few years ago that women were graduating from catch court or their treatment facility, and we're all celebrating these milestones. But then a year later, they're relapsing, and they have all of this wonderful resources and support around them, and then all of a sudden it goes away. And what can we do? So we looked at that issue, and we developed what we called the Butterfly Program for those that had transitioned on, had received the training, but were starting to live life on their own terms. They were really out there on their own. And it started as a kind of volunteer-led program where let's just get the women together socially and build this peer network where they're supporting each other and we stay connected with them. And we had marginal success. And then last year in 2018, we had some changes in our business structure that allowed the case manager some extra time. And so with her also being a survivor, I assigned her that project and said, let's see what we can do with this Butterfly Program. Let me back up. What had happened was we had a food contract with the Community Shelter Board and the YMCA. They had established a homeless shelter on the west side and had hired us to manage the kitchen. So from 2014 to 2017, we were serving breakfast, lunch, and dinner out of the shelter on Van Buren. And in addition to that, we were operating our catering business out of their kitchen. So when that ended in 2017, all of those women that were working for us, we had to place an employment in the community. So as we had successfully placed, about 10 women in jobs, we wanted to make sure we were staying connected with them and that we were helping them be successful. So with that transition, we're like, they're now butterflies. What can we do to really solidify this Butterfly Program? And so the case manager took that on, and with that, really reached out to all of these women who were, had been through programs or out there kind of on their own, and said, let's get together once a month, and we're also going to do a support group meeting. So like an AA meeting, but just for survivors. No volunteers, no staff except for survivors. Let's just get together and talk about those things that only we understand. And with that, we're now at about 100 survivors in that program, participating, supporting each other, and 80% of them have received case management service in the last year and a half. So that showed us, again, this organic growth, that there was a need there. There was this gap, and this idea, I think, of long-term support is critical, especially with trauma victims, right? So women who have experienced as repetitive and intensive trauma as sex trafficking survivors, it takes 2 to 7 years to really overcome a lot of that trauma. And obviously it's a lifetime, but that's a critical period. And so if you complete a program in 2 years and then go on your own, there's still a lot that needs to be dealt with. And so I think this idea of offering this long-term supportive community is something that we're continuing to explore and develop in ways that, and keeping that community specific. We just work with sex trafficking survivors. So it's not every woman in Columbus. And so by creating that little niche in that community, I think that's where we're seeing some success. And what's happened through that is we call it crisis prevention. When someone's relapsed, or rather it's a minor relapse or a full relapse, they reach out to us. Like, they know who to call for help. And that continues to grow and develop, where we're spending more and more time and resources on helping these women in this moment get whatever they might need. One example of that, we had a woman who graduated from Catch, worked for us. And one thing I've learned is that you can't really tell who's going to relapse and who's not. You really think you can, and you realize that everyone's so vulnerable to this disease of addiction that it's hard to predict. So this was a young woman that I thought was so very strong, but she relapsed and was back on the street, and she ended up back in jail. And our case manager, and we met with her, and she thought she wanted to get back into treatment. And it was something, obviously, that we really wanted for her. So we really worked hard in working with our partners in the industry in the area and trying to get her set up to get into a program. And when we picked her up from jail, when she was released, she wasn't ready. She didn't want to go. And that's really, really hard. Like, it just breaks your heart to have to not get them the help that you know that they need. But when they're not ready, what can you do? So she went back on the street, was rearrested again. And this was about 6 months ago. And when she got out, she came to us and said, "This time I'm ready. I want help." And so we, again, jumped through a lot of hoops. It's hard to get women immediately into some type of rehab. And so out of desperation, we put her in a hotel room to keep her safe until we could get her through all the processes. So our thought is, if she's going to run, she's going to run, but we believe in her, and we're going to show her that we believe in her. So we took her to a safe part of town and put her in a hotel, and we had volunteers come and bring her meals and take her out to a movie. Someone took her to get a haircut and just spend some time with her. So she spent 3 days in a hotel while we were working on assessments and arrangements. And then we got her into a program called Lower Lights here in Columbus. And she has been so successful. And so to see her back on her feet again and doing so well, like that's the innovation that I think is happening, to really figure out that these are our people, like this is our family, this is our tribe, and we're taking care of each other, whatever it takes. And it's not just a place for second chances, it's a place for third and fourth and fifth chances. Like we're there for you. Not that there's not some tough love and tough decisions along the way. One thing that our case manager, April, has taught us is really to evaluate what we're doing through the lens of, are we enabling or empowering? So let me give you an example of that. Early on, we had an employee come to us and say that they couldn't make it financially till their next paycheck, and they wanted to go to a payday lender, and what did we think about that? And we were like, no, don't do that. That's a terrible idea. And so we sat down, what can we do to help her? And to be honest, I come from a more charity mentality, right? If somebody has a need, I want to fill that need. And so this was a learning experience for me. So my initial thought is, we'll give her a gift card for groceries, we'll get her a bus pass so she can get to work, kind of more give. And April challenged and said, I don't think that we should just give her a gift card to Kroger. I want to take her and do a meal plan and teach her how to make these meals and how to make them stretch over the next week until the paycheck. So we're going to go to Kroger and buy 4 pounds of ground beef, and then we're going to divide that up, and we're going to make different meals out of that. And so teaching this lesson along the way. And this is a situation that she got into kind of on her own. There wasn't any kind of emergency situation that caused this to occur. So I think she should pay the money back. And I said, okay, I understand that. Over time, pay the money back. We can take it, my response, we can take that directly out of her paycheck, and that's a great solution. And she said, I think instead of taking it out of her paycheck, she should hand it to us in cash, because she's in control, and then she has that power of paying it back. And we don't dictate. We kind of give a minimum of what we would like to see each paycheck, and then they can give as much as they want. And so this woman in distress was able to get through that crisis and pay back that money and feel so empowered at the end and so proud of herself that she got through that it was, it really shaped how we treat these situations moving forward. So that's just an example of what I mean when I say how we look through that lens of empowering versus enabling.
That sounds like a lot of hard work. Are there groups that you partner with to provide support on the other angles that you don't necessarily cover?
Yes, absolutely. So that's one thing that we are really diligent and aware of, is that we can't do everything. So if someone else is doing it and doing it well, then let's let them do that, and then we'll stick to what we do best. So we partner with the Furniture Bank of Central Ohio for furniture when someone moves into their own apartment. So we pay for them to go there, furnish their apartment, and then we might supplement that with whatever else they might need. We partner with Dress for Success for the women when they need an outfit to start a job, or for their catch court graduation. The women always go and select their outfit, and they kind of get introduced to that organization through that experience. We partner with the different recovery and addiction recovery institutions or facilities in Columbus, like Amethyst and Mary Haven, the Chat House, Lower Lights. We partner very closely and work closely with all those organizations. Mount Carmel Crime and Trauma is who we refer to for trauma counseling for those. Once they leave that addiction program, they still need trauma counseling in many cases, especially when they get into a relationship. Relationships seem to be a huge trigger and obstacle for survivors, and so encouraging them to get back into some trauma counseling, and we partner with them. We have a whole list of there are other human trafficking agencies. She Has a Name Ministry. They do all of our human trafficking training. So for our volunteers, so anybody that wants to volunteer, we send to them for their training, and then we might supplement that if they're going to be a mentor with more specific things to our organization. But our list goes on and on.
So do you consider yourself an activist?
So I guess I do by the name, but I don't really think of myself that way. So when people refer to me that way, it's always kind of takes me back. I had someone once talk to me about being a feminist, and my idea of a feminist growing up was kind of an angry woman, bra burning, screaming and yelling, man hater, and I never really identified with that. But now when I think of myself as a feminist, I say, yeah, I'm a feminist because I'm all about empowering women and helping us to show ourselves as an equal sex, and I can really get behind that. I think it's all in approach, right? And so it's a different approach. I think that everything that we're doing at Freedom, and that as leaders are taking steps to encourage that and to spread awareness in the community about what's happening and how we can do things better.
Does Freedom a la carte serve all the women that come out of the catch court, or at least all the women who are willing to come out of the catch court? Or is there room for growth, I guess?
There's definitely room for growth. We do serve all the women in catch, but through our workforce development, the women that come to work for us through that program, they're not all from catch. Some of them find us through other means, through other agencies, or referrals from each other. And the same for our butterfly program. So our butterfly program started as just for those graduated catch, but it's expanded. So it's any survivor who needs that long-term support. And so that's growing as well. So one of the steps in our future is we are actively searching for a location to open a cafe. We really see our catering business is growing, but we could double the number of women in our workforce program if we had that element of that cafe and an opportunity for people to come in and just grab a sandwich, and while they're in there enjoying our delicious food, become more aware of sex trafficking and what's happening in Columbus. That's really exciting for us. We have a location that we're in negotiations on downtown, and it gives me goosebumps thinking about having this place that would be our own, that survivors would understand this is our place. Like this is something that the community is supporting us in. And it's not just about the business and the food, but it's about having that establishment. I envision the second floor being not just some offices, but a gathering place, right, for survivors, a casual lounge where they can come in and hang out, get on a laptop computer and look for a job, or read a book, or just sit down and chat with each other and know that it's a safe place to go. And so they're not in isolation if they're feeling in a crisis. A place where they know that on Monday nights there's trauma yoga, and on Tuesday nights there's a support group meeting, and on Wednesday nights we're doing, a community project. I mean, just that's their place. That is exciting for me, and I see that as an opportunity to grow more and more, that women in Columbus that are survivors will see that as their place and be able to come out of their isolation and be able to see that there's a place there, some supportive community for them. One of the struggles in this work is that people don't identify as being a victim right away. These poor women think that they got to where they are on their own, that it's their choice, and that they need to live with the consequences. And going through a program like Catch Court helps them to see that, they realize, oh my goodness, I was manipulated. Yes, someone did, I wasn't, someone else controlled my drugs and my housing and my food. I was forced to do these things in order to have those things that I needed. And so once they become aware, it's so freeing for them to now be able to identify as, yes, I was a victim and now I'm a survivor. But for a lot of women, they're still carrying that shame. They haven't really processed through how they got to where they are. And I would argue that the vast majority of women in the sex industry are victims, that they might start there by choice. You might decide you're gonna be a stripper because you think it's kind of sexy and glamorous, but you get manipulated so quickly, and drugs and money are used to manipulate in many, many ways. And so that's what I kind of see as our vision, as expanding and opening the eyes to be that safe place and community for all survivors.
How does sex trafficking work in Columbus?
Yeah, okay, so sex trafficking can look like prostitution, women walking the streets of Columbus, typically on the west side, on Sullivan Avenue, in the Linden area, on South Parsons. Those are primary areas. But it's also women that are forced to sell themselves on the internet for sex, and that are, in a hotel room while men are revolving through the door. So you see it, women in strip clubs that are there by force and manipulation. So, and then the large events that come into town are all surrounded by sex trafficking. So women that are brought in as prostitutes for the sex industry around those. So the Arnold Classic, the Memorial Tournament, golf tournament, the Quarter Horse Congress. There was just a big arrest that happened up in Cleveland around the baseball all-star game, and they just did a big sting around that. So those are the events that are happening, and a lot of those women are brought in maybe from other areas, but that's what's happening in Columbus. Some things that have changed. Can I talk about that?
Sure. Yeah.
So some exciting things that have changed. There's a lot that needs to happen, obviously, but I was talking with a colleague in this work, and we were reflecting on the fact that about 5 years ago, there was an arrest made, kind of a sting of prostitution, and in the media, all you saw were the faces of those that were arrested, the women that were arrested for the prostitutes. You didn't see any of the men or any of the Johns. Fast forward ahead 5 years to this sting operation in Cleveland, and Attorney General Dave Yost is right on top of this sex trafficking. So the Ohio Human Trafficking Task Force was behind this. And so they arrested 50-some men, and those that were buying sex, they listed the names of those people in the paper. Now, they didn't have the pictures, but they didn't talk about the women. They didn't list the name of the women. It was just the Johns, just the men. And so I think that's, in 5 years, we've come that far. That's very exciting of where looking at where we've been and where we're going. So,
do you see this a lot as part of the Me Too movement?
Absolutely. I think all of those little things together are helping us to spread awareness, are helping women to identify that, yeah, I was victimized. Like that person took advantage of me, as opposed to I misbehaved. I never should have gone to that hotel room or whatever. So, absolutely.
Do you differentiate between those who've been involved in sex trafficking and those who would be sex workers, or do you feel like that line there is too blurred?
Yeah, it's the line there is very gray. So I think that those that are victims of sex trafficking and those that are sex workers, I would say 90% are victims of sex trafficking, that somebody else is controlling their part in that sex industry. What girl says she wants to grow up and be a sex worker, that she wants to be a stripper or a prostitute? Who sells the thing that's most precious to them for money without someone else forcing that behavior? It's hard to believe. And just sharing some statistics of the women that we see and that we've treated or that have been through our workforce development program. A third of them started in prostitution before the age of 15 and as young as 3 years old. And, 80% of them were sexually abused as a child. So starting with that kind of environment and abuse, that your choices are gone, right? So that's what's happened.
Is this a women's issue? Have you ever served a man?
So there aren't as many men in the sex trafficking in the sex industry, but we have worked with transgender that identify as women, and so we refer to our women, but we have seen the transgenders that identify as women.
People who are assigned at birth male, right?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Do you think freedom a la carte, I mean, right now you're focused a lot on the food service. Do you ever see it as expanding out, the freedom a la carte, medical services, freedom a la carte?
No, I think that I see us expanding into other communities. I would love to take this model that we're doing, social enterprise, and then this long-term support around that, and replicate that in other cities, because I think we've got something there and that it's needed in other places. I really think that being a trauma-informed social enterprise for victims really helps them get the skills they need so they can transition into other employment. So that's where I see it. I really don't see us going into too far out of that wheelhouse. I would like to see us expand in merchandise, be able to sell some of our products and bottle our dressing and do some of those things. But I don't see us getting into another type of social enterprise industry.
Do you have any last memories that you'd like to share?
Oh my
Something that
goodness.
might be important to you personally?
There's just so many. There are, another example, so I've talked about how we place women in other jobs, but it's not just we place them in a job and then, see ya, good luck. We want to build a relationship with the employer. So we had a woman who wanted to learn office skills, and a law firm approached us and said, we'd like to consider hiring somebody. We're looking for a part-time office assistant. I'm like, oh, magic. Let's meet. So we introduced them, and they ended up hiring our woman. Her name's Vivian, and they loved her. She did great. She's very personable, but she lacked the computer skills that they really they thought, to take her to the next level. So once, they got into it, about 6 months in, I check back and say, hey, how's it going? Well, we love her, but she's having trouble on Word documents. And it was just as simple as taking a Word document, opening it up, making some changes, and saving it with a new name. And you can send someone to a class on computer skills, but if you're not doing that skill every day, you lose it. And what was happening was Vivian was working Tuesdays and Thursdays, so she'd be told on Tuesday, she'd do it on Thursday, but by the time she came back on the following Tuesday, she'd forget. So it's like, let's see if we can help her with this before you make a decision to decide that you have to let her go. And so we sat down, and she spent an hour with us walking through this process. Just every day, spend an hour, let's do this, and let's repeat it, and then she learned it. 2 weeks later, she had that skill. But it's just that knowledge and that relationship that helped her to kind of overcome that obstacle for both the employer and the employee, and help them to succeed. And she's been there 3 years. 3 years she's been there. So that's what's happening. Yeah.
I'm just wondering what kind of advocacy work you found that either you personally have to do or your organization has to do in order to help these women in the way that you see they need help.
Mm-hmm. So there's lots of different work being done, and lots of different people and agencies doing that work. Some things that we have to do, we have to advocate for employers for these women who have a felony. The felony right now is a huge obstacle. And so we have employers who say, I really want to work with you and I want to employ one of your ladies, but then when it gets down to the background check and there's a felony, they're like, I'm not sure we can overcome that one. Do you have anyone who doesn't have a felony? It's like, you know what, let's bring them in. Let's just meet with them. Why don't you just meet her and decide then whether you can make an exception? That's a big obstacle that we're working with. And it's not just with with employment, it's with housing as well. So housing is a big issue for our women, for survivors, just finding affordable housing. And so being out in the community and advocating for them. We have developed relationships with landlords so that if one of our survivors has established a relationship and has a good record, we will approach them and say, hey, would you consider renting to one of the other women in our program, and been able to build up kind of, overcome obstacles in that area. In fact, in one neighborhood, we had a woman in an apartment that moved out, and so we moved in one of our survivors, and then another apartment opened up in that same complex. So there's 8 apartments in the unit, and we kept moving survivors in as people moved out. And so right now, out of the 8, we have 5 survivors living in those apartments. That's like this organic support system, right? We're not controlling the rent, like that's a third party, but we've got this network of support that I think is magical. So advocating, I got off on a tangent there, so sorry. Back to advocating. In Ohio, they're really on top of human trafficking. We have lots of legislators, and I mentioned the Attorney General, really working in this area to move things forward. So I think that's amazing, and we help support them in any way that we can. They just passed last year Senate Bill 4, which was the expungement bill, so that women that are survivors of sex trafficking can have their records expunged if they are linked to picking up those charges while they were being trafficked. And so we're seeing some women have some success in being able to overcome that obstacle. It just takes some time, so we're seeing more and more of that happen.
Do you see yourself staying in the nonprofit world? It seems like you made the jump from marketing and for-profit into nonprofit. Do you see yourself staying there?
So I see myself staying at Freedom a la carte. I love my work and love this organization. I'm not doing it because I love nonprofit or that I love being an executive director. I do it because I love what we're doing. And so I just see myself continuing to stay there and moving the organization forward as long as I can.